Hi, I'm Beep. My brother Honk is running the camera today. We are the Beep and Honk Show. We are drone bees and we answer tech questions. Today's question comes from Greta, who asks, how do I solder electrical connections and what do I need to buy in order to do so effectively? This is a wonderful question. Today we will do a demonstration on the workbench. But before we do that, we want to list some hardware that you should get first. Luckily, soldering does not require a deep investment of money, but it does require a good lot of time and practice. This is a definitive list of things which will make soldering hobby electronics a low-stress process and not a chore. Lastly, if you have seen other guides online, ours is similar. We aren't adding any new surprises, just taking a slower pass through it all. So let's begin. First, you will need a soldering iron. There are many affordable and competent options available. Make sure you get an iron which has a selectable temperature setting. Old-fashioned irons with only a plug and no thermostat will be difficult to work with. The new model shown runs on a standard USB-C power supply, which has become very popular these days. Make sure you pair it with a power supply that has enough headroom, such as the 45-watt unit shown here. Using a smaller or questionably cheap power supply can make the iron drop into standby mode frequently. There are other tool options like soldering stations, which are perhaps more comfortable when working for long periods, but they can cost more and take up more space. You also need solder. One of the best options to start with is 6040 leaded rosin core solder. Be aware that unleaded solder has a higher melting point and does not flow as smoothly. It can be more difficult for new learners. While lead is toxic, melted lead in this form is relatively safe. The smoke that all solder variants emit when they melt is not good for you, but does not contain lead itself. Precautions like washing hands thoroughly after soldering and whenever you handle solder is a great way to prevent long-term exposure issues. You will also need a brass sponge. Picture it as a brass sponge ball that came with an enclosure. At the very least, some sort of tray is needed for it because it will trap all the tiny solder balls that inevitably form when you clean the tip of your soldering iron from using it. Do not use steel wool or abrasive sponge pads, as these will damage the nickel finish on the tip. Lastly, you will need some tools and fixtures to help you hold things when soldering. This is very important. The most common multi-purpose tool when working with hobby-grade gear is a small vise. This is a pretty inexpensive one made of aluminum, which works well for holding wires or connectors. Something like this works well also because it's heavy enough to not move around when working. Alternately, this block of wood with holes drilled into it is excellent too. Most of those new to soldering will find wood a surprising choice, but it's a great thermal insulator and it's cheap. There are many other tools like helping hands or other type of hold downs which you may find good use depending on what you're working with. Pliers with rubber bands and locking forceps are also great tools to help you hold down specific small items too. Now let's do some soldering on the workbench. I am going to make a simple connection adapter that sits between a battery and a battery charger. So here we go. Okay, so again, I'm going to duplicate one of these, which is an adapter for my battery charger, so that I can use XT90 batteries with this charger. And this is all it does. So first, I've taken my wires and I've cut the ends off using a wire stripper. There's many different tools you can use, like a serrated set of scissors. These are good for this sort of roll when you don't want to destroy too much of the thin wire underneath. And I've got my iron and it's plugged in, and I'm going to turn it on. So this iron is set to about 600 degrees Fahrenheit. Let me check. Yep, okay, 612. And when we use it, we are going to heat up the wire and put on solder as we work. But first, I'm going to use my brass sponge and clean the tip a little bit because it was a little dirty. And as you can see now, it's nice and silvery. I'm going to put just a little bit of solder on it. And you see that smoke, you don't want to breathe that in. And the process of heating up the wire, I'm basically putting the iron under it or near it and letting some of the solder glob up onto the wire. What's supposed to happen is that when the wire gets hot enough, I don't want to put solder here directly where the glob is. I want the wire to get hot enough so that when I start putting the wire, poking it around in other spots, that the wire is now hot enough. As you can see here, it's starting to take on solder directly without having to go back and touch the glob. So this is called tinning. And what I'm doing is making sure that the wire isn't just getting a layer of solder on top of it, but that the solder is penetrating deep inside by touching the wire itself. And that should be enough. I'm going to take the iron away. And let's look at this in the camera. You see, it's nice and shiny. And it's got a little bit of solder hanging on to the end. That's okay. We're going to do the same thing again back here. As you can see the camera, I've got clean wire. And maybe my iron it's clean enough, but I'm going to clean the tip again. 612 degrees. Same thing. I'm going to take my solder, put a little bit of it onto the tip, and then I'm just cleaning it up a little bit. The wire got bent. I'm going to put maybe a little bit of a bigger glob and have it touch the wire and give it some time to heat up. And you can see the solder will start to wick into the wire all on its own. And I'm not putting the solder directly at the glob. The wire is now heated up enough that I can start adding it to the places that are just a little bit ahead of the glob. And remember, this makes it so that the solder goes into the wire evenly and doesn't just form a coating around it. You see here, the wire is now hot enough that I am putting the solder directly onto it, just like that. And when I take the iron away, let's look at it again. And you can see it's got a nice shiny coat. All right, that's my red wire. Now I'm going to do the same thing to my black wire. Remember, all we're doing is, you can clean the tip whenever you feel like it. It doesn't have to be when it's dirty. And remember, don't push down hard. All you need to do is just give it a little bit of a drag. And as you can see, it's now nice and shiny. So I put a little bit of solder on the tip. maybe a little bit more to create a bit of a blob. A bigger blob will help you heat up your wire faster. And as you can see, I'm just holding it down a little bit. I'm just waiting for the heat to start to flow. And then I can take my solder and start touching it into the wire. You just have to be a little patient. There it goes. And you can see the solder is flowing nicely into the wire. Sometimes it's okay to make the blob a little bigger because a thicker, bigger blob means more heat going into the wire and making it easier to work. Let's look at the camera again. See? It's just nice and clean. Now let's do the last end. The tip of my iron is still clean. I don't think I really need to wipe it down, but I'll do it again. Again, gently take off just the excess solder and then put on a little bit more to create a blob. If you don't put anything on the iron, then it won't have good contact when it tries to heat up the wire. So I'll make my blob a little bit bigger, stick it right against the wire, and just be a little patient for it to start to heat up. And this whole time I'm just kind of poking at it a little bit, and you can see sometimes that the solder will then begin to spread. And when it spreads, it's because it's melted down nice and evenly. There's two metals inside this solder. There's tin and there's lead. And they have different melting points. If you don't wait long enough for both metals to flow, then you're not going to get a strong joint. There we go. I'm going to turn off my iron for now because I want to show you the simple process. This is called tinning. Look at these wires. They're not perfect. It's okay if you're not perfect. You just want to make sure that the solder is now evenly distributed across the entire round part of your wire. And you see that. And if there's a little bit of glob here, that's all right. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you can see it's going everywhere nice and evenly. All right, so that's the first half of what we've done. Now, let's get our connectors tinned. Because remember, you don't want to just take your connector, then dump them in here, and then try to apply heat. You have to get this side tinned as well. So I'm going to plug my iron again, turn it back on. We wait for it to hit around 600. All right, so same thing. I'm going to clean the tip of my iron. See, it's nice and clean now. I'm going to put a little bit of solder on it. You don't need that much. And I'm going to just hold it against the barrel of this connector here. And same thing, I'm going to wait a little bit and then start to put a little bit of solder in here. And the idea is this creates a bit of a surface that makes it easier for the wire to be received. And that's it. That's all I've done. You don't need a lot. I'm going to turn this down the other way so it might be easier for you to see. in this orientation. Again, I'll clean my iron. Put a little bit of solder on the tip. And I'm just going to hold it right up against the connector. Now, don't do this. If you don't give it enough contact, it's never going to heat up right. So you want it to touch, and you want to hold it there a little bit. And then you can give it a little bit of solder, and if you see, it's now flowing. That's very smooth. That's what we want. So we're going to stop there. Now, this is my XT60 connector, and yes, it's hot, so I have to be careful. This is our XT90. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to heat up from this angle again, which might be clearer for some people, and then I'll turn it up again the other way. We are just tinning this side of the connector. Put a little bit of solder, maybe a little more, and touch it to the barrel. And remember, you want to hold it down. Don't touch and go. Don't be wiggling. It doesn't need a lot of force, but it does need to stay here. And I'm going to just give it a little bit more solder until you'll see it. It just starts to flow and become very smooth, even flowing faster than water. That's it. Okay, now for this one, I'm going to turn it straight up. Maybe give it a little angle. Now, I don't have to clean my iron. But I'm going to do the same thing. Put a little bit of solder on it. Hold it against the metal of my connector here. Give it just a little bit of solder as I watch it melt. And when it melts, it's going to turn very silvery. It's going to be very clear and very shiny. And that's what I want. See, now this side is tinned as well. Great. So now we're going to join these surfaces. And when you look at these connectors, there's a helpful marker that tells you this is negative, this is positive. So I'm just going to do negative first. And I'll do it from this angle. It'll be clearer. And what we're going to do is we're going to put the wire here, and we're just going to hold it with a trusty block of wood. Now, my two sides are tinned up nicely. My iron is hot. I'm going to clean the tip. I'm going to put a little bit of solder on here. And now, all I'm going to do is put my iron onto the wire, or whatever you're comfortable with. If you want to touch the connector, that's okay. And now, that tinned area that I just made, it's cooled off already. It's still going to need some time to heat up. But the thing is, because it has a tinned surface, it's going to want to join in to the conductor of the connector very, very easily. And I'm just going to push a little bit of solder in here. And if you can see what's going on, everything is just lining up. I'm just using my iron very gently to guide it. Well, I moved it. That's no good. So I need to put it back in, give it a little more solder. And this wire can be hot, so you don't really want to be touching it directly. There we go. We're just going to let it cool. There was my negative connection. As you can see, it doesn't need to be perfect, but there's plenty of solder holding it in. It's not going anywhere. The cables are hot, so you have to be careful. Now we'll do the other side. Same thing. I'm going to now put my positive lead here. I'm going to clean my tip. Doesn't have to be perfect, but you may see that there will be black deposits that will form. That's just carbon from burnt up rosin, which is part of the inside of the actual solder itself. The rosin is kind of like using butter in a pan. It helps everything flow and stick better. So I clean the tip. I'm going to put a little bit of solder right on the tip, maybe make a little bit bigger of a glob, and I'm going to push that down onto my wire, and I'll just be patient. You don't need a lot of force. You just need to make sure it touches. None of this requires force if you do it right. So now it's starting to flow, and I can start to push gently the solder right into the area that I'm working. I'm touching the wire. And you can see it's very shiny. That's what you want. That's when the solder is flowing nicely. Okay. I'm going to let this cool down a little bit, because what we need to do is actually put the cable glands in before we continue with the rest of the soldering. Now the wires are just about cold enough that I can touch them. So I'm going to thread this cable gland here on this side. And on the XT60 side, it has one as well. So I need to just put that here. Okay, now same thing. We're going to look at this connector, and it actually does tell you negative and positive. I'm going to do the negative side first. I don't think I need my wooden block now, because I'm going to just turn this on its side and just sort of lean on it. Now, I might need something to hold this. So I'm going to use my pliers with a rubber band on it. And this will be enough just to hold this here while I work on it. Okay. So I'll turn my iron back on. Let it heat up. Okay. So same thing. I'm going to clean the tip. Still not that dirty, but it's a good habit. Put a little bit of solder on the tip. You can see it flowing. I made a bit of a blob. And I'm going to touch that blob right onto my wire. And don't worry if it doesn't fit. You can see a little bit here that the wire is too fat for the conductor. But when this heats up enough, it will soften and it will sort of force its way in. And I don't need to give it a lot of force. Give it a little bit more solder. And then I will take the heat away and let it sit still. Okay. It just needs to cool down enough so that it hardens. It's good. Okay. I'm going to flip this over. Make sure that this cable gland doesn't run away. Now I think I don't need to use anything. I can use my fingers to just clamp it. No, I'll use my pliers again, just to hold everything down so it doesn't move. Oh, it needs to sit higher up. So again, this is where things like a block of wood lying around can be very handy. What's happening is I'm putting the connector higher up so that it will want to go where it needs to go. My iron is powered up. Last time, clean the tip. Give it a little bit of a blob. And then I'm just going to gently park it right on top of the wire. And just kind of wait for it. Give it a little bit more solder so it sticks. And I can feel the wire starting to move, that it wants to fall in. And I make sure that the solder is nice and bright. That means it's fully melted. And that's it, I'm done. I'm going to turn off my iron and just wait for this to cool down a little bit. And that's it. The cable glands need to be pushed in. And I just want to double check that I've got everything in the right place. Negative to negative. Yep. And then over here, same thing. Positive, negative. Good. Now I've just made a duplicate copy. So there we go. And you can see soldering is an essential part of the FPV drone hobby. All of the components such as flight controller, ESCs, receivers, and VTXs use different connector types. And there is no fixed standard on any of them. Even the wiring pinouts can vary wildly. Therefore, it is best to follow wiring diagrams and learn how to solder down connections directly instead. The hard wire way of soldering also creates the lightest weight and most durable connection types. Always remember that soldering is not going to be easy when you start out, and that is okay. It is rather difficult. It is half technical and half art form. You're basically learning how to do calligraphy in metal. Take your time, be patient, and practice on broken electronics or soldering practice boards before you try your hand on real working components. Anyhow, I hope this answers your question, Greta. For you and everyone else watching, you can do it. I believe in you. Okay, goodbye, everybody.